What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. So I had a few clips of me working on this truck here, the Avalanche, and I think I was doing the lowering kit. What I did in the rear was just I cut out the section on the frame where the bump stop was originally mounted, and then I put a bump stop on the actual axle itself, drilled a nice hole in it, so when the axle comes up, it actually has a bump stop and it contacts the frame. It's drove really nice since I did that. Honestly, this thing drives like stock. I don't have as much travel as I thought back there, and I do have smaller bump stops that I could switch to if I would like, but it's honestly fine. I haven't even really noticed. I think it bottomed out maybe a couple of times, and it's pretty cushioned. I don't really hear it. It's not loud or anything like that. So not really a big deal to me. I like it, and that way nothing gets broken back there. I got plenty of cushion. And in the front, I did my lowering keys. I took them out of my other truck, threw them on here, and to be honest, it didn't really lower it enough in my opinion. I want to try to decrank them a little bit more, but they're pretty much all the way out, which, you know, has a certain ride quality that you don't really like. But it's not that bad. It's a little mushy, but for the most part, it drives okay. I'll decrank like that and lower it down, but it is still squatting a little bit in the rear, so I do really want to fix that. I don't know if I'm going to put a 1-inch spacer in the rear, which would probably be cheaper and easier, but I also like how low it is. And I'd like to have the front be even lower, which would be nice, to have that little bit of rake to it, because I think the stance is really nice on it. It just needs to be a little lower in the front, and it'll be a bit more aggressive looking, but I do like how it looks. So I'm probably just going to try to get the spindles for the front and a 1/2-inch wheel spacer with longer studs and just knock all that out all at once, and then maybe do the front brakes over too. And this might be a next, after winter project. I don't know. That seems like a lot of work to do, but it would be super cool to do that. So we'll see if I do that next winter, and then probably work on the transmission too. I want to try to get a 480 in it, but I'm going to stop rambling right now, and I'm going to move into what I'm actually wanting to do tonight, which is, for me, I want to put the intake air temp sensor in a different location. So right now, the intake air temp sensor is right here. This is where the stock evap purge valve is, right here. And I took that out, stuffed this IAT sensor in there out of like a blazer or whatever, and basically, broke it out of the MAF harness, because the mass airflow normally has the intake air temp sensor, but if you find the 2 wires that are responsible for the intake air temperature in the mass airflow, you can break those 2 wires out. They make harnesses, but you could just find the 2 wires. It's not like it's hard. And this is your mass airflow plug, and this is the rest of it here. So what I'm going to do is unplug this guy right here, and I'm going to try to do it without breaking it, because these things sometimes do break. Okay, so I got it without breaking it. So I'm going to go into here a little bit, extend this, and I'm going to put it somewhere else, because I'm concerned about the heat soak. I've been having issues with heat soak. So if you look at my infrared thermometer here, it says the intake right here, 90 degrees, 91, 90. If you go over here, it's right around 90 degrees, 92 even, 94, 5. So the whole intake here is pretty hot. When it's running, it's obviously way hotter than that. So what happens is it can heat soak into the sensor. Prolonged periods of idling where the airflow across this is not great enough to cool down that sensor, what happens is it'll get heat soaked. Or the other scenario is you park the car and it sits, and the hot engine bay, basically this is right over the hot area. This whole engine is super hot, and it's just going to bake. And so what happens is the car sits, and everything gets warm in here, and then you get back in the car to start it up. And then in order to cool that whole system down, it takes a while of air flowing across the sensor to actually cool it down to the real temperature. So that's kind of a bummer. I thought this would be a good spot because I knew other people had used this, but it turns out that it's not a good spot. It seems like it's really prone to heat soak. I am going to leave it there for now. I can always go back to it, but I do want to relocate it. So if you look at this intercooler piping here, this stuff is all pretty cool. 78 degrees right here, which is like a little bit cooler, 80 degrees. I don't know if you can see that. 78 degrees, 77. That's pretty cool. And then if we come over here into this pipe, even cooler, 72. So I'm thinking somewhere in the bottom of this pipe, it's like 68 right there. which I think would be a really good spot. You know, even over here would be nice, but it's still 70 degrees over here. So we're all in this region here. We're going to be a lot cooler, and I think it'll be a lot more accurate. I know that it's best to have it in the intake because that's what everything's burning, but to be this much off and to avoid the heat soak, I really don't think it's a big deal. We can compensate for it in the tables and things like that. So we're going to put it over here because the heat soak is throwing me off, and it's making this thing near impossible to tune because I guess, you see, GM has a way of doing this where they have two tables. They have the engine coolant temperature table, and they have the intake air temperature table, and it's more of a bias between those two tables. And so you go in and you fill in these numbers. Some cars it's 0 to 1, some cars it's 0 to 2, and you fill in at what pound per hour airflow are you gonna do, you know, on your 0 to 2 scale, how much is it biasing one or the other. So like 2 will be the engine coolant temperature sensor, and 0 will be the intake air temp sensor. So if you do a 1, it's biased to neither. It's right in the middle of both of them. So basically, what you do is bias the engine coolant temperature at lower flows because it's more prone to heat soak through the intake and everything like that. And so it'll bias the engine coolant temperature more in those scenarios, but then on higher flow areas, it's going to bias the intake air temp because that's when it's going to be more accurate. So that table is there and you can do that, but it's super hard to tune when you have heat soak involved because it kind of throws everything off. So that's why I'm doing it this way, and I'm going to try to just eliminate heat soak as an issue. And if I can do that, it should make tuning it like a lot easier. And then I can actually be pretty close, because right now what I'm doing is tuning it, and then at a different temperature, all the air fuel values are totally different, which is super frustrating. So like I feel like I have it dialed, and then like another day, a slightly different temperature, it's totally different. So it just totally wrecks it, and then when it's heat soaked, it'll act totally different as well. So it really throws everything off, and it makes tuning it just like near impossible. So that's what I aim to fix, and we're going to try to relocate the IAT, see if that helps. So I completed what I set out to do. I didn't take you much for the ride, but basically what I did was stick this intake air temp sensor in the intercooler pipe. So I took it apart and I drilled a nice hole in it with a step drill bit, and I kind of kept going. I ended up using 2 different bits to where I could get this grommet to fit in there. I have this assorted grommet kit here, and this is the one I ended up using, this size here, and I think this is the one with the least in it, 5 pieces, 7/16 grommet size. And I think on the drill I used, I don't know, I couldn't tell you, but you drill the size hole you need. I just kept going up slightly and using sandpaper to file it till I could get the perfect size to where I could get the sensor in and get it locked in here with this grommet. So it's really tight. Like if I turn this, I can turn the sensor, but it's very tight. I don't think it's gonna leak. If it does, it'll be so minuscule. I'm not too worried about it. So that should be my new setup, and I'm just gonna go ahead and pop that in there. I definitely don't think it's coming out. You can really tug on this guy. It should hold, I'm sure, 20 pounds or whatever of boost or anything I throw at it. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back together, and all I got to do now is lengthen my wires. So the wires are going to get cut and lengthened all the way to this section over here. So I'm going to grab a couple of wires and throw some crimps on there and get this thing all fired up. And we'll pull it out of the garage and see if we can get a bass tune on it, and hopefully this thing stays a lot closer to what I would like, and not all over the place, because that is just driving me crazy. So I got it all wired in. Probably can't even see the wire, but it comes down here, and I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking, the radiator is going to blow on it a little bit, so hopefully that doesn't have any effect. I think I'm gonna aluminum tape or heat wrap tape this whole elbow, that whole section of pipe there, to try to isolate that from the engine bay temp, and try to avoid heat soak there. And I'll isolate this sensor too and heat wrap the sensor itself. I'll just try to get all the unnecessary heat out of that sensor. I want it to just read the air coming in, not have any heat soak involved. So I think it's a much better spot than it was before, but it probably could have been better like over here. But it is what it is. It's still going to get a little heat soaked with the engine bay temps too. So it's not the end of the world, but you know, for the most part, I think we're in the clear here. I hope it works better. I'm going to fire this thing up and mess with the tune a little bit, but I'll just keep that to myself because, you know, like everything else, I don't really know what I'm doing. So anyway, I'm going to probably work on some other stuff now, and you guys will probably see something totally different for this next clip. So like I said, completely different setting in this next clip. But basically the truck is right outside this garage door. I'm warming it up. We are getting some snow. We got our first snow flurries coming down this year. I don't know if you guys can see it, but yeah, that means truck's got to be ready for winter. It's starting to accumulate. I'm about to pull it in because I've been having some issues with fuel starvation, but that's for another video. I will tell you guys about that soon. The intake temp sensor did fix it, which I'm pretty excited about. It seems like it's a lot more stable. I also went through into the table of the bias with the IAT and the ECT, and I sort of set it to 1, which should be right in the middle, so it'll always use both of them. And then I think that it's really been really stable. I've been having issues here and there with fuel starvation and the fuel pump. I think because I put the sock inside of the bucket for the fuel pump sender. I really should have that screen, the little fuel pump sock, outside of the bucket. So I'm going to try to go pull the gas tank back down and fix that, along with fixing the feed hose that I used the wrong line. So I knew I was going to have to do this again, but now I'm going to try to do it the right way. So I'll pull it down, find out what I need to do correctly, and set up the Walbro 450 with the correct stuff, and hopefully I don't have any more starvation issues. It was below a quarter of a tank that I was having all these issues. But anyway, this is for the next video. If you guys are interested in that, definitely subscribe and check that video out, how to do the fuel pump correctly, because I definitely showed you how to do it the wrong way in a different video. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. The intake air temp sensor did fix the problem, and you know, relocating that sensor leads to no heat soak. So I'm gonna pull this thing in. I'll give you a little start. Let's see. I don't want to cool it down too much in here. So I had to jump it because I left my inverter plugged in and it was charging my laptop and it died. So now I got the jump box on it. There we go. That's much better. Now I can pull it in. So, I got the truck started, I got it all jacked up, and this is going to be the end of this video. Watch the next video to see what goes on with the fuel starvation issue and see if we can get that figured out. It's just one issue after another with a project like this. It's a big undertaking and you're always going to run into problems, but you just got to work through them, pick through them one at a time, and you will persevere, you will get through it. It can be discouraging, and I get discouraged all the time, but you know, something in me just keeps me going, and eventually we get everything figured out and it's all dialed in. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see more videos, and peace.